Hello friends, today we are going to discuss about the issues and challenges faced by African continent and how India could use its position to maintain peace and stability in the African region. This topic is covered in UPSC GS Mains Paper 2. The African continent has 54 countries and covers a population of 1/4 of the southern hemisphere. The African countries are already part of many multilateral forums such as G20, BRICS, United Nations, etc. Let us see the challenges faced by the African countries. Many African countries suffer from poor governance, corruption, nepotism, and lack of accountability. This problem undermines the legitimacy of a country. Most of the countries in Africa face with the challenge of rapid population growth, urbanization, and environmental degradation. Tribal and ethnic conflict is also a source of concern in most of the African countries. Many of the African countries witnesses frequent tribal clashes over land, water, and other resources. These conflicts not only result in the loss of lives, but also destruction of property, creating conditions like famine, drought, and displacement. The threats of extremism and terrorism is linked to some of the countries in Africa. The global terrorist groups often exploit poor population of Africa in order to recruit fighters for their terrorist organization. Many African countries are highly vulnerable to the impacts of climatic changes such as rise in temperature, floods, droughts, desertification, etc. These climatic changes affects their life, food security, and health of the Africans. The problem of high inflation is an economic problem faced by many of the countries in Africa. The high food prices were a result of short supply of goods, market distortion, speculation, and currency depreciation. Rapid urbanization, which is unplanned, is a serious issue in Africa, which leads to overcrowding, emergence of slums, and social exclusion. Africa is subjected to many military interventions by countries like USA, China, Russia, and France, etc. These interventions led to the emergence of military dictators in Africa. In the recent past, China has significantly increased its investments in Africa, and many of the African countries have heavy reliance on exporting raw materials to China. This has led to the Africa vulnerable to the Chinese economy. Let us see how the India's interest is affected by the problems in Africa. India has significant trade and investment with Africa, which is affected by its instability and insecurity in the continent. Indian-African trade has reached about $100 billion and India is the fifth largest investor in Africa. India has a strategic interest in maintaining peace and stability in Africa, especially in the Horn of African region. This region is important because the shipping lane connects Indian Ocean to the Suez Canal. India also participates in the peacekeeping missions and counter-terrorism efforts in Africa. India also provides training and capacity building to African security forces. The turmoil in Africa poses a serious threat to India's security as they create breeding grounds for terrorism, crimes and human trafficking, etc. The India also enjoys a long-standing partnership with African countries. India has a large diaspora of 3 million people in Africa. The insecurity in the continent will affect them. India also provides for humanitarian assistance to African countries affected by military conflicts, natural disasters, disease and epidemic, etc. Given this situation, how could India use its position to help Africa? India could use its diplomatic influence to support African countries in their quest for peace, democracy and development. India can also advocate for African voice in international forums like UNO, G20 and WTO. India should also establish trade-free areas in Africa, which will aid the import and export of goods and services. India can also provide market access and quality services to the African countries, and India should not only increase its development assistance to Africa, but also should share its best practices and experiences with African nations. Indian state should contribute more in collaboration with Africa in countering terrorism, organized crime and human trafficking. Finally, India should boost its science and technology innovations in collaboration with Africa by supporting scientific research and development in Africa. India has advanced in the fields of science and technology in multiple areas, and it could promote the same type of development in Africa by encouraging the startups, developing the educational infrastructure for the advancement of science in Africa. India is the leader in Indian Ocean region. India's interest could further progress with the effective cooperation between African Union and India, and this would emerge a long-nurtured friendship between India and Africa for the generations to come. Thank you.